If you are a San Francisco 49er fan, you are extremely familiar with this situation that is playing out across the league. Now, it's not everybody. A lot of people have given Brock Purdy his respect. I mean, he is currently sitting as the MVP favorite, but there is a conversation that continues to be had. And obviously, last week, it sparked crazy debates over Cam Newton calling Brock Purdy a game manager. And we're not going to rehash that. We've said enough. But the point being about that is there's a lot of back and forth about who Brock Purdy is, what he is. Is he good? Is he a product of the system? Is he a product of his weapons? And there's just ongoing conversation to try to quantify how good he is. And I really thought that Charles Davis did a really good job on the broadcast explaining from an evaluator's standpoint why this has been difficult for this particular group of people. And when I say and emphasize evaluator, not everyone's an evaluator. When you look at these guys like Nick Wright, you look at any of these talking heads, typically most of them, especially if they didn't play back in the day, they're not evaluators, they're talkers. And so you give them talking points, you give them statistics, you give them anyone can watch a highlight and say, oh, well, Mooney Ward just got 2 interceptions, or Brock Purdy threw 4 touchdowns. But one of them was wide open to Christian McCaffrey, and so wide open, Christian got up and scored. I think you get what I'm saying. So it's like evaluators are a different breed of analysts, because you also have beat reporters, all the evaluators are much different. Charles Davis is an evaluator. He's a guy who does all the draft coverage for the NFL Network leading up to the draft. He's constantly talking about draft prospects, evaluating draft prospects. And so he gives a perspective from an evaluator's standpoint. And I think it's really important what he says. And I want to share it with you to kind of give you a look from a football perspective, not necessarily a media perspective, a football evaluation perspective of why people have been so slow to give Brock Purdy his credit. Take a listen to Charles right here, and I have a lot to say about it on the other side as well. But take a listen and let me know what you guys think in the comments after you hear it.
And there's a phenomenon amongst evaluators, and I'm one of them because I do it for the NFL draft, that if we determine a guy is a 6th, 7th round free agent and he plays really well, it takes us a while to give him credit because we're wrong. And we don't like to be wrong. But the bottom line is, take that and throw it out. We missed. This young man's the truth.
I love the evaluator's perspective because as me, who definitely considers myself a football evaluator, I love evaluating draft talent. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing today. It just happened to grow into this crazy brand that covers the San Francisco 49ers. But at the core, I love football evaluation, specifically player evaluation and draft evaluation. So, and Charles is a guy that I've watched break down prospects year after year after year. I know what he sees. I have a really good understanding. He's one of the better guys when it comes to evaluation. And his whole point being is, no evaluator likes to admit when they're wrong. It's like, I like to say that I trust my football evaluation with literally any of these guys across the league who do it for a profession, who actually talk about it on TV. I have over a decade's worth of experience doing breakdowns on players. And so I also have a decade of seeing who hit and who missed. And guess what? I like to talk about the players who I hit on, not necessarily the players that I miss on. So that being said, I love him bringing that reality to the situation. When you have a Brock Purdy, a Tom Brady, one of these guys who just slipped down the cracks, everyone looked over, didn't think was going to be worth anything, and all of a sudden are putting everyone on notice. And not only putting everyone on notice, they're putting the evaluators on notice, because the question then becomes, how did you miss this guy? And this is one of the things that I talked about in the Cam Newton thing when he was talking about, oh, no players are looking for the net, or no GMs are looking for the next Brock Purdy in the draft. And I had fundamentally disagreed with that take because people are looking for the next Brock Purdy. Not everyone has a top 5, top 10 pick where they're going to get Caleb Williams or Michael Penix or Drake May. They're not going to be able to get those guys. So if you can be like the 49ers and you can strike gold in later rounds, the 49ers now have Mr. Irrelevant who barely takes up a cap hit, who's leading this team full of weapons because they can afford it. There are different ways to find success in the NFL. And so when it comes to the quarterback position, I think that's a position that will always rely heavily on physical traits and physical tools when it comes to passing the eye test, all these different types of things. But Brock Purdy is continuing to prove that the intangible, the mental makeup, the person, the heart, the it factor that no one knows how to describe, which basically just comes down to the intangibles, is what makes these quarterbacks really, really great or not. And I think, the perfect example of kind of the counter, like the exact opposite of Brock Purdy, is actually a quarterback who's on the roster in Sam Darnold. I still maintain to this day that Sam Darnold is probably one of the most gifted throwers of the football in the NFL right now. But that was never his problem, and it was never his problem in college. I remember going to a Cal game, actually, where I got this towel. And I was excited because I was like, oh, they're playing USC. I get to go see what all the hype is about with Sam Darnold. Now, while there were throws that Sam made were absolutely chef's kiss, he also made 3 of the most insane decisions I had ever seen, and they all resulted in interceptions. And they almost let a team in Cal who had no business winning that game almost beat them. And at that moment, I was like, if you're making these kinds of decisions in these particular moments, like that is very not a confidence builder in me. And for me, I always put the intangible level of quarterbacks at a high regard when I'm scouting quarterbacks, because as an offensive lineman, as a center, I knew when those intangibles impacted me as a player, impacted my huddle, impacted our locker room. So I've experienced it firsthand. And when I was playing through the lens of an evaluator. I wanted to be an evaluator after I was done playing. So the point being is kind of what Charles is talking about, kind of like using Sam Darnold as a case study, using Brock as a case study. There's no, there's so many different factors that go into evaluation. But one of the hardest things for these guys to give credit to Brock is because to give credit to Brock, you're admitting you're wrong at the same time. And I think that is the hardest thing for these guys. Now, when it comes to the media, take that thought process and times it by like 10. They have no actual like foundation to stand on for player evaluation. They just have a take to stand on. So they stand on takes, 10 toes down much longer because they don't have the vision. They don't have the eyes, the training to understand truly what goes into the evaluation. They just look at stats, they look at narratives, and they start just to spin on things. That's why you still have media guys going 10 toes down and just staying pat, and they're not moving off their, Brock isn't that great, take. So I love the take. I love everything that he had to say, because I do think that that is a part of it for evaluators, guys in media, and things like that, because Brock has proved everyone wrong. The fact that he proved the 49ers wrong. The 49ers were the team that drafted him, but they passed on him a bunch of times. If they truly believed in him, they wouldn't have banged the table for him with the very last pick in the NFL draft. They would have taken him way earlier. So everyone missed on Brock Purdy, but it's the San Francisco 49ers who are reaping the benefits because they made the decision that they did have guys in the building, Brian Greasy, Bobby Slowick, banging the table to get Brock Purdy in that building. And since then, the rest is history. But I just love the kind of behind the scenes from a football evaluator standpoint of why these guys are having a hard time of giving Brock Purdy credit, because it goes to them being wrong. And listen, wrong on draft takes all the time, all the time. Obviously, you're going to prop up the ones you get right, but the ones that you get wrong, you're like, things happen, circumstances change, la da da. But when you're right, you're like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. See, I told you. So I get it from that perspective, because I have been right a lot. I've also been wrong a lot, but I've learned from those mistakes. I've learned from those situations. And as an evaluator, guess what? I was a guy who liked Brock coming out of the draft. Did I expect him to be what he was today? No, I didn't. But I did like what he brought to the table in the little tape study that I did on him. And he was definitely a guy that stood out to me on tape. Again, to the point where I wasn't even watching him. I was watching his tight end, and he stood out to me from that moment. So again, I love it. I love the explanation. I love the thought process behind it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.